Well, hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Stephen, and I'm the host of the Take Care and Live podcast. Really glad to be connecting with you today. The purpose of the podcast, the Take Care and Live podcast, is to help us live, lead, and thrive through the intersections of life. And there are plenty of them. I'm sure you can agree. There are plenty of intersections, crossroads. And sometimes we know exactly what to do when we approach them. There are times we have no idea at all what to do. And there are times where we're doing it and we're entering it, but cautiously. And sometimes the apprehension can do more harm than good. Sometimes the apprehension is practical and wise to have. All that being said, the purpose of this podcast is to help us distill from those experiences and see how we can take those lessons from those experiences and use them to help us be better, not just for ourselves, but for others. And so when we are faced with experiences that somehow seem like they come from nowhere or they're unexpected, in fact, they can be disheartening. But it's crucial for us, particularly now, to be sensitive and not reactive when we encounter a life experience that we didn't anticipate. Here's an example. You ever enter a highway, since we're here using that metaphor, you ever enter a highway expecting to be able to just travel on the road and lane you usually do, because that's the path you always take, but then experience a sudden traffic jam that isn't typically the case for that area where you typically enter the highway? Well, it causes us to get a little frazzled at first because we might be sensitive to the time we're in. We have a place to get to, a time at which we need to get there. And those become roadblocks for us. They become frustration points. Sometimes we don't even know that additional length of time could be protecting us from something down the line, that our desire to make schedule, Lord knows I struggle with that, wanting to get to a place and then running late. I internalize so much frustration from that because I didn't want to be late. I'm sure you could identify with that. But sometimes that delay is actually for our benefit. It's really crucial, is my point, to be sensitive and not reactive when we encounter experiences like that. It's a balance that helps us discern when a challenge is simply a setup for something greater, or it's a new opportunity that might be seeming initially unfavorable, but be the opportunity that is moving us ahead of than where we are right now. Sometimes what seems like a setback, and I've experienced this, sometimes what seems like a setback or an unnecessary obstacle is really God creating a new path that's accelerating you and I towards a desire that you have in your heart and that aligns with God's purposes for your life and his plan for you and for other people that you have the potential of influencing, even if it doesn't look like that at first. So take a moment and think about an experience you might have had that actually felt like a roadblock, an unexpected situation that you feel or felt was a barrier. For example, it could be getting fired from that job that you thought you were going to make a lifelong career or build your career on. Or it could have been losing the bid to that house that you imagined in your mind and in your heart would be your dream home where you'd raise your family in that state or in that country. Or it could have be being faced, I'm sure we can identify with that one, being faced with an unexpected expense that caused you to have to recalibrate your budget and derailed you from a financial goal or for some financial plans you've had. Sometimes the very thing that feels like a roadblock is actually an accelerated road designed to get you where you need to be faster and where you can add greater value. Maybe getting fired from that job that you initially thought was going to be the place where you built your career feels or felt like a disaster. Maybe you're in that experience right now. But let's be honest. In reality, if left to your own devices, would you leave that job? Would you have left that job? Or would you have gotten so comfortable that you would not have now been in the position to take the leap towards what it is you are most gifted to do? Doesn't mean you weren't gifted to do that, but this opportunity created the space for you to now get even deeper, more aligned to where you're gifted and talented, and to offer those gifts and talent in the space where you can add an increased level of value than where you once were. I remember many years ago, I lost a job after pouring a little bit over a year of everything into leading the organization. I was new to the organization. I was new to the environment. And so for me, there was a steep learning curve, a learning curve I was excited to engage in. It was a challenge that I thoroughly wanted to be a part of. And I thought I was going to be there for at least 5 years. I thought being there would be a great opportunity for me to build a lifelong career in that area. I felt called there. But the loss of that opportunity came sooner than I expected. And I also discovered that that loss wasn't the end of the story. I was recruited by the very woman who was a part of that group of folks who hire, your hiring panel. The very woman who had hired me for that opportunity ended up being forced out of the same organization herself not too long after that. But just 2 years later, after me losing that job, I ran into her again. And this same woman ended up recommending me to be a part of a high-profile team that she was appointed to lead by the governor. Had I stayed in that job that I lost, had I allowed the loss of that job to really begin to dictate how I would see any future opportunity, I probably would have been reluctant to say yes. And I probably would have missed out on that amazing opportunity to have an even greater impact than I would have had just remaining in the one position where I had the privilege of remaining for a little over a year. Sometimes you and I need to be pushed out of our comfort zone. Sometimes the future that we're supposed to walk into isn't paved with gold. It isn't paved with many yeses. Sometimes it's filled with a lot of no's, a lot of walls, and some barriers that feel insurmountable. Sometimes we got to get pushed out of our comfort zone to move into the future where we could actually make an even greater impact. But here's the key. If we don't keep our ears to the ground, so to speak, if we don't remain humble while we experience that kind of roadblock or hardship, we might misinterpret that temporary discomfort as a setback that will derail our future forever. When in reality, that setback is temporary. And it's actually an instrument that God uses, is an opportunity that God uses to open up a new lane in the highway of our life, a new lane that's actually meant to accelerate us and allow us to get to the desire we have in our heart and that align with God's purposes for our life so that we can impact people and the sphere we're called to have influence to an even greater degree. There's a powerful verse, Isaiah 43:19, that says, "See, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Can't you see I'm doing a new thing? Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. What does that mean? Well, these words were actually spoken to the people of Israel who were stuck between their past and their future. They were no longer slaves in Egypt, but they were not yet in the land of Canaan that was promised to them, the place that they would call their home, the place where they would have freedom, where they would not be dictated to by kings who wanted to utilize them, their bodies and their minds, for their own good. They were freed from slavery in Egypt, but they were not yet in their promised land. And what they needed to do while they were between the prison and their promise, this place of transition, was to keep their eyes and ears open for the sudden and simple and easily looked over opportunities that God was creating. The sudden blossom of the new leaf of opportunity that was making their way towards them. The sudden stream of a new path forward that they could step over and negate as a distraction rather than what was pointing them to where a larger body of water or a larger opportunity was present. Had they allowed themselves to be imprisoned by their current circumstance, rather than see it as a space that they were passing through, they would have foregone this privilege of moving into Canaan, the promise that was made to them. They were in a transition between what felt like a prison and their promise. And this space for any of us can be really difficult because it isn't always something that we want to hear or know that we have to go through. It's a difficult waiting space. And in fact, if we're not careful, and some of the folks who are on this journey weren't careful, they lost heart and they allowed their position between the prison and the promise to keep them from getting to the destination because they lost faith. They lost hope. So what does that mean for us today? How can we apply that to our own life? Well, first, let me just give you a few tips to help you to understand how you can navigate these situations. Don't judge. First, I'm going to tell you, don't judge your journey by its current cover. Don't judge your journey by its current cover. The circumstances that you're facing now aren't necessarily a reflection of the long-term outcome. Keep an open mind. Life doesn't always unfold as we imagined, but these kinds of experiences, the sudden loss of a job, the need to utilize money you didn't plan to spend in a particular direction, you losing the bid on that house that you were hoping they would accept your bid for. These experiences actually can become resources for us. They become resources that we can leverage as teachable moments to help us be flexible in the moment and extract from it steps and actions and decisions that we can make the next time that allow us to get to where we want to be, that allow us to get what it is we want, but even better. It's really important that we don't allow these temporary hardships to deter us from a commitment to our vision. So, yes, number one, don't judge the journey by its cover. I knew myself that, I was called to lead this organization. And a strong sense that I was called to lead an organization, period, was what I should really say. And it was a school. But I also knew that I was called to have exponential influence on more than one school. multiple schools at one time, not just a single organization. But I needed to get fired from that opportunity. That was great training ground, an accelerated space to learn, so that I can develop the muscle that I needed just 2 years later to take on a role that was far more expansive and that allowed me to have positive outcome shifting impact on several organizations over time at the same time. An experience that other people would typically have to wait years to get. So, don't judge the journey by its cover. Be flexible. Be open to taking lessons from it so that you can take those lessons and be prepared to use them for a new opportunity and in a new experience. Second, embrace the resistance. Listen, there's tension everywhere. There are moments of opposition and friction. Sometimes everywhere we turn, we feel like there is another roadblock or challenge. But we don't get refined by easy street. Our potential is refined through friction. Muscle is built through tension. You know why it rains? It rains because the precipitation in the clouds get too heavy for the clouds to hold on to it any longer. And so something breaks. The pressure mounts and it causes the rain to fall. Sometimes the pressure is what we need in our life that produces something greater in our life and for our life. Just like the opportunity I walked in 2 years later after losing my job. Finally, I'd encourage you to do this. Don't go through the journey alone. What do I mean by that? Certainly, there will be experiences that you yourself will have to face. You will face it. We face them. It is called living. And I would be a fool to say that every experience is easy to get over or easy to adjust to. That just isn't true. However, once we know we are faced with that experience, once we encounter that experience, it's important that we bring other people along with us in the journey. Reach out to people who have walked that path before. Sometimes we experience something and it's just downright embarrassing for us to even talk about. But not talking about it, not exposing it, and looking for people who have experienced that actually hinder us from growing. It hinders us from getting the wisdom we need through asking questions and learning from other people's experiences that as a result of them imparting how they navigated it could actually help us be even better in our adjustment period. Very few challenges are unique. There are very few challenges and experiences that other people haven't had that were similar and that they could offer us the guidance we need to get better. If I go back to that experience of when I lost my job, that was a profound moment for me because I'd never experienced that before. I was used to always doing well, being praised for the work that I had done, getting positive reviews. In fact, I still got positive review. It just, I was in a space where something happened to me, not because of me. But I had never experienced something that profound before. And it was me opening up to a few people that gave them the room to speak into my life and encourage me that, hey, Stephen, this is just a moment in time. And this will very well happen again. This is called living. This is called life. But it was opening up to their wisdom that I was able to hear some of what they were teaching me and showing me through their own experience of having walked through something similar. A great mentor of mine reminded me, he said, you know, maybe you're just learning to live simply. Maybe this is a space to learn simply, to not expect to have so much, to cherish managing your resources better. Maybe this is an opportunity for that. And it certainly did provide that window of time for my wife and I to kind of reset where we were financially, to live within our means to an even greater degree, to experience the humility of having to adjust our resources and our dependency on one another in ways that maybe we would not have had I been able to just pursue and move through with this experience without having the loss of the job. Some of these things become resources for us. Some of these experiences, while in the moment appear very hard and uncomfortable, are actually setups for us that God uses to accelerate us to new territory. I'm thankful for that experience because even now it had such a profound impact on my life that I'm able to utilize the lessons from that experience and certainly others that I had later on to be an even more effective individual who can guide other people through their own challenges, through their own conflicts, through their own moments of difficulty. See, that experience created in me both muscle and resources that I can now pass forward to others. So think about where you are now. It's temporary. It may not be the most comfortable, but it could also be a setup that God is using to accelerate you forward into something else far greater than you ever could have imagined. Because God's plan is to see us prosper, to make sure we have hope, to make sure that while we're here on earth, our future is bright and is something that benefits not just us, but others. So remember that as you move forward today, because what I'm encouraging you to do each and every time you join this show is to take care and live. And God wants us to do it as abundantly as possible. We'll talk again soon.